Good afternoon, everybody, and we are hoping that people can see us live here, and we're hoping the recording is actually taking place so that we don't have to do this again. Um, so again, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Chris Martens, and welcome to the Proactive Risk Management for the C-Suite monthly webinar series. I'll be your host and moderator for today's webinar, and for those of you who don't know me, I am a Vice President Business Development Executive at Assured Partners. We work with management teams across the country who are looking to increase cash flow, reduce volatility, and ultimately get more control of their company's insurance and employee benefits. A few quick thoughts on technology. Given the significance of the topic today and the panelists lined up to speak, it is possible that some of you may experience intermittent video or audio issues. It generally lasts only about a minute or two, and it's most often related to your local internet speed. Just sit tight as it usually passes. Also, if you're having audio issues, you may want to consider switching from computer audio to telephone or vice versa. Looking ahead, we will have time near the end of the program for questions. When appropriate, please type in your questions in the question area of the chat panel. We may not get to all of your questions, but we will look at the questions after the presentation and provide responses back to the attendees. This webinar is being recorded today and will be available for replay. Lastly, if something we've discussed today intrigues you, or you wanted to schedule some time to go over additional questions or dive deeper into the topic, absolutely reach out. You can find me on email, call my cell phone, or send me a message on LinkedIn. As I mentioned to Katie and Connor prior to today's webinar, I would love to generate discussion and thought leadership from today's topic and welcome additional conversations. So let's get to the show. Let me introduce our panelists. As I like to say today, we've got a dynamic duo from EVHC. We've got Katie Shaton and Connor Buck. Why don't you two briefly introduce yourselves?
Sure. My name's Katie Shaton, and I'm the Regional Vice President here for Evolution, or EVHC, I'm sorry. And I've been here for a little over 2 years. I spent my entire professional career in employee benefits, and I'm covering employees that we manage in the Northeast as well as the Midwest regions, one of those being Connor.
And hi, everyone. My name is Connor Buck. I run broker relationships with great brokers just like Chris from New York City all the way up to Boston and Buffalo. So I'm all over the Northeast, and it's a pleasure to be here today.
Great. So our topic today is self-funding your employee benefits. And now more than ever, CEOs, CFOs, leaders of HR, and business owners need innovative solutions to be proactive, when it comes to one of their largest and fastest growing line items on their balance sheet. Without going too much further into the topic, I'm going to hand over the reins to Katie and Connor. Why don't you guys take it away?
Sure. Thank you.
I'll start sharing my screen. Give me 1 second.
Yeah. So I guess I'll start talking while you're finding that. A lot of what we want to discuss today with the audience is the uphill battle we've faced as it relates to changing health insurers and ultimately bring you down the path of why to self-fund, right? So part of that rub is what's gone on in our industry historically. Part of it is inflation, something we're all facing in our businesses and with turnover with employees. And part of that is just, it's a lot of work to change. So people have stayed put. They've stuck with the easy button. They've tried to beat their current carriers down, and I don't want to be a broker during this day and age. I'll tell you that. It's definitely tough out there. So one thing that EVHC is ultimately trying to shed light on is first of all, self-funding doesn't have to be hard. And we have done an intentional job of making it simple and watering down the product so that for you, the employer or the HR person, it's digestible and it's easy to understand. Our solution in particular has a lot of unique benefits that Connor is going to end with in the last 10 to 15 minutes of the presentation. But I really want to focus my portion of the conversation around the healthcare landscape, past and present, what's the market impact been fully insured relative to self-funding, and then where are we today with self-funding, general knowledge basis. And I think, having spent 15 years in employee benefits, sitting in a lot of rooms with CFOs and HR people, a lot of you guys have the same concerns, questions, and ideas around what self-funding can really mean for you. So I really want to explore that today as we go through the presentation. Next slide. Really the why EVHC is, we recognize that many, many years ago, this carrier marketplace was littered with options for you. Unfortunately, now we do trade healthcare specifically in an acronym that we call BUCA. Next slide. So when you think of the benefits you put in place today, you have the health benefits, which are generally your number 2 most expensive line item next to employee salaries. Then you have the other added value adds. So the life and disability benefits that a lot of employers used to offer voluntary and now are doing employer paid to keep employees active and retain them. And in that world, you have 400 plus carriers you can be working with. But in our world, on the employee benefits side, as it relates to your healthcare, we trade this in an acronym. So BUCA, B meaning the blue shield of the world. So in your markets, it could be Empire, it could be Anthem, it could be Highmark. Then you've got United, then you've got Cigna, my former employer, and then you've got Aetna. And really what's happened is premiums are continuing to rise, and regardless of what flashy product you've tried to move into, and I'm going to talk about a few of those later, the reality is these renewals continue to spike. The average trend on the renewals in the fully insured world is about 12 to 15%. Every year, these carriers hide behind an aging population. Well, I think we all know we're all going to get older later, right? So nothing in terms of the conversation has become earth-shattering. And all that's continued to happen is literally over the past 11 years, you have continued to pay more than 68% inflation as it relates to employee benefits. So we want to cut that. We want to get you to a point where you're paying only the claims you have to pay to cover your insurance. And we want to be able to allow you to pocket some of that money back because these carriers have gotten fat and happy, to put it simply. Next slide.
Katie, actually, I know I kind of was going to save the Q&A kind of towards the end. Kind of, can we just go back to that last slide really quickly? And just be totally transparent. This is somewhat of a loaded question, but I see towards that top bullet point, right? With premiums continue to rise, which no one's going to really, argue that. But I see you've got 5.8 medical rate trend.
Mm-hmm.
Is that continuing to trend higher, or is that actually probably a stale number at this point? Are we maybe closer to 8, 9, or 10? Or talk to me about that.
Yeah. So these carriers all publicly file their trend numbers, and none of them say 12%. The reason for that is on their actual book of business, they're all targeting CPI, which is a consumer index number, but their trends are able to be driven down purely because of decisions employers are making. So it starts as a 12 to 15%, and then you have to talk about benefit buy downs is one of the biggest things that people have to do. So where the plan actually lands is a lot lower, and that's what's really bringing this medium down or this average down. But the trend itself, and you'll see it in all of our proposals, is upward of 12% now. And it's something that we're utilizing to kind of show people financially, at least, the differences between staying in a fully insured model and moving into a self-funded. So not an old number, a number that's influenced by a number of things, all things that impact all the things I talked about earlier. Employer decision-making, you are continuing to have to sacrifice your benefits to be able to sustain them and keep people in the doors. So that's what we want to talk through today.
Thanks, Katie.
Sure. So this question, have you ever considered self-funding your employee benefits in the past? I assume a lot of the interest towards this webinar is because you've either tried it before in some realm of the spectrum of risk, or you've thought about it, you've been talked about it from your current agent or another agent. So I really kind of want to talk through with you what have been your reservations. And what I have found in my 16 plus year career in this space is a lot of these reservations continue to be the same. And those are, my company is too small to self-fund. Self-funding is extremely risky. It's going to cause disruption to my employees, which is the number one concern, I would say. It sounds like a lot of work. And I'll, before we go to the next bullet, say a lot of the concern around this is due to, look at what we just went through with COVID. Look at how companies have, from an employee stance, have lowered the amount of employees that are in the field or in the factories or whatever the case may be. Too much work is because we don't have enough resources to support a change. And that's something else we'd like to solve for. Next bullet. Financially, I feel that the stability that I have in the fully insured model is ideal. Regardless of if I get higher renewals, my agent always gets them down. And financial stability can be two different things. It can be predictability of a fully insured model, so I know what I'm getting into. Or it can be, I've gotten a flat renewal. And I would argue this a couple different ways, guys. You know, a lot of people have thought of self-funding prior to or post ACA, right? So in 2008, Obamacare came out and transparency became the buzzword of the century, and we're still using it today. And it's absolutely relative and important. But you have not been empowered with data through the products that are out there on the market. Largely today. The predictability that people like in the fully insured model really is, my carrier is not showing me a lot of information, but I know there might be some risk. And I know that Nancy walked down the hall and she told me her kid has been in the hospital a few days, or whatever that feels like to you in your current environment. So getting a 14 or 15%, I think I can handle that. I'll do benefit buy downs. I'll change my contributions. Don't lose sight of the sacrifices that you've had to make to maintain this predictability that you're looking for. And for the 0% renewal, I would argue, don't think of self-funding when you're in a tough spot, right? And that's what happens a lot of times. People have put it off because I've gotten zeros. This feels good. I haven't had to change benefits. And statistically, 1 out of every 3 or 4 years in the fully insured world, you'll get hit with a higher increase. In the self-funded world, that's 1 in every 7 years. And that's truly just because we're giving you more information. We're able to identify gaps in care and emerging high claimants sooner than in a fully insured model. And because of how the product is filed, which is self-funded or ASO, administrative services only, we have to share that data with you. And that's just what it comes down to. So I would argue, I don't have a magic bullet for the tough year. It's going to be a little harder to jump into a self-funded model at those times. And by that, I mean, when you're getting a 35+% renewal, right? And that happens more than you think. Hopefully it hasn't happened to you. But I would argue when you're getting these trend increases that become zero time, because what that says to me, again, I never bash a carrier, but I spent 9 years at a former carrier, one of the BUCAs, and 0% means you're profitable to them. That's all it means. They're making enough money off of you to be able to issue you a flat renewal to maintain you. You've probably gotten your renewal sooner than a lot of other people because they want to lock that profit up early. And there's a lot of cases that are getting tougher renewals, that are being dragged out and have nowhere to go that you're substantiating. You're leveling out that book of business at the BUCA world, but it feels like you're winning. So don't lose sight of the shell game, because the house always wins, never the employer in a fully insured model. And then the last bullet is, I simply just don't understand it. What does self-funding really mean? Next slide. So historically, these next 2 slides will be quick. We have seen a trend moving towards self-funding. So what that feels like to people is, you may have heard the words level funding or alternate funding. It's been very popular in the 200+ employer group space. In the 390 to 199, it's gained a little less traction, or it's taken a little more time for you to kind of get there in your mind. And that's why we want to focus the latter half of the presentation on the simplicity that we can bring to a self-funded model. But as you move into today, the next slide will show you that we are seeing more and more interest. I mean, largely in this, what I would call under 1,000 group size, you are seeing a larger interest in self-funded, which is substantiated, EVHC's existence and also success in your markets, especially in the Northeast. I mean, we as a company, although we're not talking about us right now, we started in the Northeast. We started our book of business in New York or in hubs where there was large, fully insured employer cases like the Northeast. And now you'll see us across the country. Next slide. So I would say the next 15 minutes are going to be focused on the funding continuum. So we have 3 sections to this presentation. I just talked a little bit about the why. Now I'm going to get into the how, right? And what you've seen historically. And then we're going to end with a couple highlights on EVHC. So what's in a rate, right? When you look at what I'm going to show you on the next slide is what I call the product risk spectrum. It's fully insured, alternate funding or level funding. So some level of risk sharing. You may hear that in the words surplus share. You may hear that in the words transparency. And then there's kind of full-blown self-funding. We're going to fall somewhere in the middle there. And the reason we level set you with this slide initially is because I'm here to tell you that the same components exist in all of those products. The difference between being in a fully insured world and being in a self-funded world truly comes down to your level of control. So in a fully insured model, margin still exists, stop loss still exists. They have to cover claims, right? Someone has to administer the policy. So that's administration. There's got to be a provider network, unless you're looking at some level of reference-based pricing, which we're not talking about today. You have to get your prescriptions covered. And consciously, we like to think about HRIS or Ben Admin as part of that, because I've had employers that have saved a boatload of money with me and haven't moved because they've been with ADP forever and they're changing enrollment systems, and that's already a burden on its own. So all of these things exist regardless of the product you're in. But what we're here to do today is kind of expose the difference between maximum liability and expected liability, which we'll get into in a moment, and really that control that I was talking about. So we're here in the partially self-funded, and we're going to end with that. But let's start with fully insured. Okay. Fully insured is a canned offering. So 20 years ago, we were picking off of benefit booklets. I still remember looking at individual employee apps when I first started in the industry, and we've evolved since then, thank goodness. But largely, the concept is you are paying one maximum rate, and regardless of where your claims fall under that, over that, etc., you probably will never know, and you will just continue to pay one rate. Now, what do people like about that? They like the predictability. They like that they know what to budget for. They like that they know how to set employer contributions. And they've been trained to look at benefit buy downs. But guess what? I mean, I sit physically in Pennsylvania. I have some employer groups that are already at $5,000 and $6,000 deductibles. There's nowhere else to go. So we tried HSAs, we tried this smoke and mirrors with financially moving money around, and it still comes down to the same end result. You have no control, right? So you have predictability in this model, but you don't have upside. The premiums are fixed for a year. It's based on enrollment. That it only changes if you hire or fire people. And then guess what? Year 2, they say, you all got older. And then they say there were claims. So the con to this product is really you don't understand what's happening under the hood of the car, and therefore you can't solve for it, right? So you're making blind benefit decisions, and you have no ability to retain any unspent claims money in this type of model. Next slide. So fully insured is like buying a pizza on a Friday night. This is one of my favorite analogies I use. You buy that pizza, you're rushing home after school and hockey practice, soccer practice, whatever. And guess what? You got home and all the kids are going to sleepovers. Dad approved it. Okay, well, I just bought a 12-slice pizza that no one's going to eat. Now, in my house, that would still be eaten. But for the purpose of my analogy, let's assume it sits there. You still bought the pizza. You paid the full price regardless of how many slices were eaten. So conceptually, I want to take you down the path of learning how to pay by slice. And that's really what self-funded can be for you. So another statistic I like to use or analogy is, have you ever gone to the casino and actually won? I'd say that probably happens 1 out of every 10 times. Maybe if you're lucky. If you're me, it's 1 out of never, because I never win at the casino. The house always wins. So long term, it's not a good strategy, right? And we need to start opening ourselves up to what else is out there. Next slide. Then the next trend was level funding. This was my favorite. I mean, listen, I lived in the level funded world for 9 years. I pitched it, I sold it in other markets, and I finally got to the point where I realized this is not all it's cracked up to be, right? So it's training wheels for self-funding. So you've got your training wheels on your bike. That's what level funded is. And what these carriers have said, so United Healthcare has the All Savers product, Aetna has AFA, and Cigna has level funding. Cigna was the first to come out with this product. It became very popular during ACA Obamacare because people were thinking and talking self-funded in the small to medium-sized employer group size. And the allure to it was, okay, I still get my budgeted maximum liability. So I know what my budget has to be, $1 million. Okay, $1 million for 100 life group, we'll call it. I know I need $1 million for healthcare. But the benefit to level funded, or at least as it was intended, was, well, guess what? If you come in under $1 million, right? And I have the administration and the fixed costs at $300,000, and I have your claims projected at $700,000, but you only come in at $200,000 in claims, we can share that money. But the hook to this product is, first of all, you need to renew. So I can't tell you how many renewal meetings I've sat in with my former employer where we're dangling this carrot of a $30,000 surplus share, but they're still getting a 16% renewal. So when you look at the financials, we're increasing their premiums $50,000, but we're saying, ooh, we're giving you a credit back. And then the agent sits there and says, well, this is really only a 20% renewal. No, all of your individual rates for your employees that you set contributions on are accounted for in this rate increase of $50,000. And P.S., that's your money anyways. So don't let them dangle that carrot in front of you. You should have kept that money in your pocket the whole time. And if you did keep it in your pocket the whole time, you wouldn't be thinking of it as them giving you money back. This is money you've put into your pot. You outperformed it, and you're just going to take your money back. But that's not what level funding is doing. It's really a shell game. It's them allowing you to feel you have a little bit of control with the dollars being spent. So they're giving you paid claims reporting on a monthly basis to feel like you're getting more, right? You're getting more than just fully insured, which gives me nothing. But the problem is, first of all, you should be receiving 100% of your unspent money back. Why are you sharing it back with another carrier? Secondly, you shouldn't have to renew to do it. It's your money. You know, you paid the maximum liability. So if you outperform the plan expectation, you should get that money back. And thirdly, it was a promise of data that really never came true. Understanding what a carrier has paid for you still tells you nothing. So, oh man, I'm having a hot month. I spent $100. What was the $100 spent on? Was it spent on pharmacy? Was it spent on medical? How do I know how to adapt and change my plan design to drive better affordability if I don't know what the money's being spent on? So they'll give you a cumulative report that shows you to give you an idea of what your renewal should look like. And guess what? That idea never comes true either. So we kind of want to get you out of this hamster wheel that is, you're always going to see an increase. And every year we're going to do a full marketing. And once Chris gets your results back, he's going to try to leverage the market and get rates down. We need to get beyond this. If we can understand what's under the hood of the car, we can continue to change the plan, the policy, the coverages to adapt with your population. And a prime example that might hit home with people, even though a lot of the people on this call may have been involved in those conversations directly, is think of COVID. Think of how many employers had paid $1 million for their healthcare and had to lay off 50% of their population. Do you think the carrier gave them a credit? No. Do you think they got negative renewals? No. Everyone continued to pay more because the cost of doing business continued to go up. And if you were in a self-funded model, you would have been able to immediately feel the impact financially, even though no one wants to lose employees. You certainly shouldn't be paying for employees that aren't here, right? So, or paying for that risk. And that's kind of what I'm talking about. So next slide. My favorite, you can go to the next slide, Connor. My favorite analogy for level funded is it's like Kohl's Cash. So who are my ladies on the phone, right? You have to spend money at Kohl's to then get a $10 or $20 coupon back for the next time you go to Kohl's and spend more money, right? So I'm going to flash this carrot in front of you, but you have to come back and spend more. And what happens when you come back? You always spend more than you spent the first time, right? Because you got this extra money. So you're accounting for that inflation. That is what level funding is. There are levers you can pull in a level funded model that make you feel like you've got more control. So one of them is the data transparency I talked about. The other is the margin. So margin can be anywhere from 10 to 25%. What is margin? Margin is a preset level of inflation that's put on your claims simply because it's a self-funded plan. So a lot of people think and they say, okay, well, if I have the same claims in a year and fully insured, right, versus level funded, my plan should be more expensive. In theory, yes, it will be more expensive, but your ability to retain the unspent claims money is how that's offset. So myself, Aetna, Cigna, United, we can't help the fact that we need to put margin on claims. That's a federal mandated guideline. But what I can do is I can give you the ability to only pay claims as you need to, which allows you to not pay maximum liability. And maximum liability is how you're running plus margin. Okay, so I want you to keep margin in your bank account. And that brings us to EVHC. Why are we a better solution? What is our differentiators? How are we driving affordability through better cost containment and better strategies with medical and pharmacy? And then lastly, that data that we're giving you, how is it different? And how is it usable? Because if it's not usable data and I don't know what these things cost and why, I can't make educated decisions moving forward. And that's what brings us to our conundrum we're in today, right? So I keep referencing COVID, but COVID was a really pivotal time for us. And we're arguably still not out of it. I know someone with COVID right now, right? I said, I thought that was over, but it's not. I mean, the aftermath of what's happened through COVID, less people going to stores. I mean, I would love to see statistics on the grocery store and how prices have increased. I just went on Wayfair, if anyone knows that website, and I looked at a patio table that I bought 6 years ago. I wanted to get an extra chair for it. The same patio table is $1,000 more today than it was 5 years ago. So this has affected us in all levels of our lives, but mostly food, water, basic utilities, they've all gone up. My electric bill has tripled. I have the same house and I'm using the same amount of light. My electric bill has tripled. Less employees are able to go to work because gas prices have tripled. So these are the things that we can't control. So it is paramount that at this moment in our employee benefits decision-making, or even before you come to your open enrollment, that you consider self-funding. And why, even simply because you can hold unspent claims money, it may be the right fit for you. So with that, I will empower you to take control of your healthcare dollars, and I'm going to hand this over to Connor.
Yeah, awesome. Hello, everyone. So it's really important to note here, right, that, well, first let's talk about a little about who Evolution is, right? When you're going to a self-funded plan, you're not looking at this as a one-year solution, as Katie put it, a silver bullet to potentially save money because you're having an off year. We want to be that long-term solution. Who we are as a company is we are solely a self-funded healthcare platform. We were founded in 2008. We're based out of Baltimore, Maryland. Like Katie said, we started building our entire book of business up right here in the Northeast, in Connecticut, New York City, the surrounding metro area. So we're very familiar with this region, right? We have 1,000 clients already since we started in 2008, all this great stuff. Our target employer is that smaller market, right? 100 to 1,000 employees, where the BUCA carriers, they have self-funded products for this area of the market, but they don't want to bring those products downstream because, as Katie told you, this is the most profitable part of their business, the fully insured and the level funded coming together in that under 1,000 space. The second they start self-funding that, they know it's not going back to level funded or fully insured. And all they're going to be doing is collecting admin and PPO access fees. It's not what they want, right? They want to control the entire picture, the pharmacy, the pooling point, etc. So we target 100 to 1,000. Our actual client range is everywhere from 51 to 4,500 employees. So we run the full wide range of gamut as far as employee sizes go. So this is appropriate for all sizes, right? What makes us so attractive in the small market? Now, when I say small, I mean under 1,000, right? So 1,000 may not be that small, but in the eyes of BUCA, that's what they're considering smaller. What's so attractive about our solution and bringing it downstream is we're helping those smaller employers. Our average client size is only 238. Purchase healthcare just like a Fortune 500 would, where every single component is customizable. When Katie was going through that level funded and that fully insured diagram, all these components that make up your rate, whether you're level funded, fully insured, it's all the same, including even in self-funded. But the difference is that, let's say it's a Cigna fully insured, Cigna would own the reinsurance, or we call it stop loss in self-funding. Cigna would own the network. You're stuck with the Cigna network. Cigna owns the PBM. All those hyperinflated pharmacy prices for really expensive drugs that you hear are a third or a fifth of the price in other countries. That's because BUCA owns the formulary, and so they control all the pricing, and they're profiting off those expensive drugs. So how do we bring this downstream and make it digestible for an employer who's probably not that used to this level of customization, right? And flexibility. That first part is going to be your reinsurance or your stop loss. Now, it's called pooling point in a fully insured or level funded plan. It's always going to be built in there, right? But in that fully insured plan, you're stuck wherever you're at because they're just going to renew it. Whereas we, Evolution, we're taking it apart, we're putting it back together, and that stop loss component is now plug and playable with 25 different options that we have throughout the entire stop loss market. They're all A-rated carriers. Our underwriters are the best in the business. They've been around for ages. We have the best relationships to lean on. A really key thing that we're doing with these stop loss carriers is that we don't carve anything out. So everything that we invest into our admin, everything that we invest into our pharmacy solutions, that's all tying back to the stop loss. So across the board, we're getting 10 to 15% discounts on these stop loss carrier quotes. So we're getting you the best deal possible. At renewal time, if the incumbent carrier that we plugged in for you in year one is giving you an unjust renewal, we have the entire stop loss market to leverage against itself to make sure we get you a better deal. And we can quietly make a switch behind the scenes if we need to. So no need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. No, new eligibility, new ID cards. We're just going to quietly make that change behind the scenes in order to save you money in the long term. That's why the self-funded medical trend is only less than about 5%. Fully insured medical trend, that's that 12% that you see that Katie was talking about earlier. From an administration perspective, we have so many resources on both the front end and the back end of things. Front end of things, we're sitting down with you, we're meeting with you on a quarterly basis. We have a lot of data that we throw at you because we want you to understand what's going on behind the scenes. We want to prepare you for your renewal. But if we're throwing a bunch of data and you don't understand it, then what's the point? So we actually sit down with you on a quarterly basis and walk through that data. Are we having too many ER visits for something that we should be educating folks about virtual telehealth? Are there people utilizing drugs that are too expensive? Do we have different outlets that we can source drugs differently? All these things we're having talks with you on the front end on a quarterly basis. On the back end, we have 200 nurses who are flagging things behind the scenes, which we'll get into later. But just know that they're pouring so much into our administration, and we are looking into everything to make sure that we can uncover ways to help you mitigate cost. From a network standpoint, we can plug and play any network year over year. That's pretty simplistic. Again, that's just changing the ID card. And then the biggest differentiator for us is that PBM, that pharmacy component. And we keep in the CVS Caremark PBM because it was one, it's probably the most widely recognizable contract, brick and mortar formulary there. However, what's unique about Evolution's solution is we never carve that out because we have the unique ability to carve out at that member level. So if John Smith is on a very expensive 6-figure drug, and he's making less than $111,000 a year, we can carve John Smith off the CVS formulary and go directly to AbbVie, to the drug manufacturer, get him his own ID card, and now he accesses that drug at 100% no employee or employer cost. So that 6-figure drug cost is now wiped away from the employer spend entirely.
And Connor, I just want to drive this home with another example. So we didn't talk much about this. And again, I would encourage further discussion with both Chris and EVHC to continue to talk through these things, because this could be an hour on its own. Trust me. But very simply put, to put this in perspective, okay, Cigna, United, Aetna, and Blue Cross, when they issue fully insured or self-funded plans, they are using their own stop loss. So stop loss that they own, claims that are paid through their own doors, with, they would argue, more ability to do cost containment. But the reality is, if you have a bad year, you have a bad year. There's no such thing as bad risk. It's informed risk. And you need actionable data to be able to adapt and change your plans. But it's largely predicated on the information that those carriers want to give you, okay? And that is a little bit slanted because it's their own stop loss units. So you have to put that in perspective. When you see this list of carriers, while it is not all inclusive, these just happen to be the carriers that we have a majority of our business with. You'll see Cigna, United, Blues on there. You'll see stop loss carriers owned by them on this page. But they're really on there because we need to show you we work with them. They're never going to give me a better deal than they give themselves. And they're going to never give you a better deal than they give themselves, which is why I need to stay completely agnostic in this realm. Arguably, the most important piece of your risk coverage is the stop loss piece. So when you're handcuffed by one carrier who owns their stop loss and you have a bad year, you're in that same hamster wheel we talked about before. So the EVHC difference, and what this slide is meant to show you, is, listen, we can pivot. We don't need to stick with that carrier, because guess what? Now you've been with us a year. Maybe you have a tough run, but we've got better claims to go back out to the market to convince other carriers to take on your risk. And that's something Buca's never going to do for you, because they don't want to lose that piece of the pie. It's a profit driver for them. The other thing is the pharmacy. They are all owned and or own the PBM they are using. Aetna is owned by CVS. Cigna owns Express Scripts. United owns Optum, right? So those are profit centers for them. Even if you're currently with Aetna today and you use CVS with Aetna, and then you move to EVHC and you use CVS with me, my relationship with CVS is such that A, they provide a formulary, period, end of story. You want to add a drug to that, you want to carve a drug off that, we can do that as claims come up. We can do that ahead of time based on your needs. We can add drugs in. I mean, this is self-funding. This is ultimate customization, right? But the other differentiator is I'm not going to force you to use CVS. So my relationship with CVS is, and I'm not talking about going to Walgreens and Rite Aid, right? That's just swapping one thing out for another thing. I'm talking about the ability to go to third-party vendor relationships that we have in place via Price MDs, CRX International, and Clever RX, which Connor's going to talk about. CVS knows I'm actively looking to go off of their formulary to achieve best net cost. And again, I don't want to belabor this, but if I'm overpaying for a drug in my plan spend, which all of you are, and we're going to get to that eye-opening statistic in a moment. If I'm overpaying for that drug and all I care about is the drug being accessible and the person using it who needs it, which are all very important, and the people side of this and episodic healthcare are at the heart of what we do, right? But there's also a financial side and an administrative side. And our ability to access over 800 drugs overseas or through other domestic programs that we have in place, which are not all shown here, that ability is going to save you money in real time. If I can get Humira's a bad example because that just came off patent. Let me use Remicade. If I can get a Remicade J-code infusion, which is on average $30,000 every 6 weeks for an employee who needs it. So think of that times 12. I mean, think of the money piling up here, right? If I can get that for $12,000 and immediately have your plan spending less money, your employees spending less money, and I can immediately impact your utilization, we're in a much different position at renewal than we are when we've overpaid for Remicade every 6 months, right? So this is less about having access, which is how, I mean, oh my gosh, I think about my grandmother, my father, people that should have been using their healthcare and should have been looking at other doctors who were in network, but all they cared about was going somewhere and having coverage when they need it. And we can't think like that anymore, not in any aspect of our lives, but especially in our number 2 largest expense on the balance sheet, right? So I need to have you understand the concern and the need that's built around this, because right now, pharmacy and stop loss are 2 areas that Buka is 100% utilizing to drive profit through their doors, specifically in the under 500 employer space. So the employers that can't afford it are supplementing the employers that have already gone self-funded, right? Like think of that graph chart I showed you in the beginning. And that's what we want to get you out of. We want to put you in a better scenario.
And Katie, well, hold on. Let me jump in here real quick. And I got to pat myself on the back, guys. I have done a phenomenal job of being very un-Chris Martens-esque and sitting here and not talking and biting my tongue. But as I sit here and I listen to you guys speak, I'm just like, oh my God, thank you guys.
Well, thank you
for literally saying some of these things that need to be said, right? And as I've been listening, there's been a couple of things I've been writing down. Going back to the beginning, right? There's always this perceived versus actual, right? That I always like to kind of, ask, people in the C-suite, right? Is this a perceived or is this actual risk? Is there increased risk or is there, less risk by going self-insured, right? Do you have more control now in the fully insured model, or do you have more control in the self-insured, right? And then I like to take it a step further, right? When you strip out state taxes and carrier profit, that goes right to a company's balance sheet. That increases cash flow, right? That could save jobs, or that could give you the ability to add more people, right? If you're looking to hire and attract and retain current employees. So there's so many things that I just had to touch on there really quickly. Yeah. You guys are doing a phenomenal job. Hope I didn't take you off the rails here. Just wanted to make those points right there really quickly.
Yeah, I mean, this is usually the part, where we can get, really granular with all the different stuff we're doing behind the scenes, right? And you don't have to come away knowing every single thing that we're doing, from the stop loss, how we're handling the pharmacy, right? The main purpose of this slide is that, listen, these are the components. They exist whether you're fully insured or with EVHC. Are you going to overpay for it, or are you going to let someone partner with you, be that long-term partner and strategize with you so that you know that you're always doing the best possible thing, right? That's why we're meeting quarterly and discussing what we can do better, right? So, I think the best analogy to kind of compare the 2 different scenarios is renting an apartment versus building a house. Now, when you're in a fully insured arrangement or level funded, if I say fully insured, I also mean level funded. That's basically like renting an apartment, right? Because you can't customize anything, right? The landlord controls all of that. He's the one collecting all the money. And at the end of each 1-year deal, you're going to look at a few things. What's my increase? What can I do to get this increase down? Can I move across the street to a similar apartment and save a few $100? Is that the best thing for me? We're doing that month to month. I lived in New York City for years. I know what that leads to. You're just going to end up paying more and more and more over time. It's exactly what's happened in the fully insured market. When you partner with someone like EVHC, you're basically building your forever home. The foundation of that home is cost containment, right? So, stop loss is like a dishwasher. Drugs and formula, that's like another appliance. We can customize anything we need to your specific needs, right? We can adapt. A full insured plan cannot do that. So we are always building in a multi-year strategy, right? That's why at the beginning of every one of our proposals, we're showing you a 5-year cost trend, because we're not looking at this in 1-year increment. We are looking above and beyond that. Kate, is there anything you'd add to that? I know this is your favorite analogy.
It's my favorite. I mean, I'm the analogy queen, guys. No, all I would say is you need to think of self-funding less in terms of is it going to cost less? Because this isn't a transactional conversation. This is about investing in yourself, investing in your forever home, making an investment into employee benefits so that you can drive affordability long-term that you cannot do in the fully insured world. And even as you become a larger employer, there could be an employer on this call who's 800 lives who said, oh, well, I always get negative renewals and I always am able to do whatever I need to do in the BUCA world. Again, all that means is there's money on the table. There's never a bad reason to go self-funded. There's only, it might not be the right year to go self-funded, right? Because again, we are convincing a risk pool to cover your claims. And part of that conversation involves A, knowing what the claims are, or B, being able to price for them appropriately if we don't see what they are. And we have a couple different things we utilize to assess that risk. But, we're here long-term. And that's what this is also supposed to tell you. We're not here to give you something cheap 1 year, because when you leave us that second year, no one's more better off. This is a 3 to 5 year strategy that can hopefully be a lifetime for you, because really our tagline is we're the last healthcare plan you will ever need, based on the fact that we can change, adapt, plug and play all of those components we showed you earlier. It's an investment.
So big contributor to the whole 12% on a fully insured plan increase year over year. Big thing carriers do is auto adjudication. What that auto adjudication means is that they don't look into a claim whatsoever. They are just whitewashing that claim through. BUCA carriers do this at a rate of 95 to 98%. And to the normal person, when I first heard that stat, I thought, oh, that's good. That means it's efficient. It's not efficient, because what happens is you miss things like upcoding, where things get, more expensive because they got coded wrong. They're miscoded. They're double billed. All these little things add up, right? But on the bigger picture, what happens is that no one looks into any sort of cost mitigation strategy for any sort of procedure. A good example that I like to leverage or talk about is one that happened here in White Plains in the school district that we have on one of our plans. And there was a special needs bus driver who every 6 weeks, he was on Remicade, that same drug Katie talked about. He would have to go take off work, go into the city, pay for gas, pay for parking in New York City, sit there for 6 or 7 hours, get back in his car, drive himself back. Now, forget about all the cost that's associated with that, right? That's just a huge pain in the butt for that poor bus driver. But it's costing the plan $27,000. That's something that was reoccurring on the plan every 6 weeks. And we picked it up the first month that it came through on our plan once we took it over. First thing we did was, okay, no reason that we should be paying these expensive hospital costs. Why don't we set up this bus driver with a home healthcare nurse option? And instead of sourcing this drug through a hyperinflated BUCA formulary, why don't we see if we can get it through a manufacturer assistance program? Or why don't we see if we can get it through a CRX and Price MD? I'll talk about what those are later. But essentially, those are just outlets where we can get drugs at a much lower cost. All in all, we turned that $27,000 claim into a $5,000 claim in the first month. So it's a small 200 life group. $22,000 every 6 weeks goes a very long way. So that's what the employer's pocketing. And they're also getting all this goodwill back from the employee, which at the end of the day is what we should be most focused on. Oh my God, I get to stay home, my fuzzy slippers, watch Ellen. I have a pretty nurse giving me my drip. This couldn't be better. I get to save on all these other extraneous expenses. So, with 200 nurses behind the scenes that are looking into, alternative drugs, alternative procedures, that's the EVHC effect, right? Coming full scale. So I just want to turn this, Chris, I don't know if you have a chat feature open, but I want to put this out to the public. Do you know the average percentage of total plan spend that is typically attributed to high-cost drugs and specialty medications?
Well, I'll tell you, we don't have the chat feature open today. However, if you are watching this, this is going to be mind-blowing for anybody that's either watching this live or watching this going forward. I'm not going to hold it up any further, Connor. So why don't you kind of, reveal the unfortunate details here?
Right. Every dollar you put towards your health plan, 40 cents is going towards RX. Ranges from about 35 to 45% of your healthcare spend goes towards specialty RX alone. But what is your plan doing to address that? And we all hear about how these BUCA formularies have ridiculously high, drug costs compared to other countries, right? So is your plan doing anything to combat that? Absolutely not. Why? They're making a profit off of these really expensive drugs.
And I will say, then they tell you there are rebates available, right? This is my favorite discussion. I could talk about this all day. Rebates are, we're going to let you continue to overpay. And then because we made too much money, we're going to give you some money back. Do you think you're getting 100% of the money you should get back? Heck no. I almost cursed, but I won't do that on a live stream. Absolutely not. And again, it's predicated on reporting they want to show you. So 40 cents out of every dollar is being spent on drugs on average. What are we doing about it? Don't talk to me about giving me money back after I've spent it, because my renewal's been compromised. My employee contributions have had to go up. I've watered down my benefits. What now? Do not let any agent or carrier really corner you into the rebate discussion. Please bring me, Connor, and Chris on the phone, because I would love to talk through that. At the end of the day, rebates are a promise to overpay. They are not a cost containment solution. They are a financial shell game, as we've aforementioned, to make you feel like you're getting something back. So that's what they're doing about it, but it's not the right thing to be doing about it.
I mean, it's kind of like the Kohl's cash metaphor that you used, right? I mean, why would you overpay $20,000 a month for Remicade when I can get it for you for 12? Or in that bus driver's instance, we actually got it for free through a manufacturer assistance program. And just to take the statistic even further, 80% of drug spend comes from 2% of drugs, which means that 32 of this 40% figure right here comes from 2% of drugs on the market. So in the instance of that bus driver, if you're a 100 life employer and I can save you $200,000 off of just one drug, that totally changes the conversation at renewal time. So I mentioned this a lot before. One of the strategies that we utilize as a manufacturer assistance program, because of our unique ability, no one else can do this that I know of, with CVS, to carve off of that member level contract, we can go and access high cost specialty drugs directly from the manufacturers at zero employee and zero employer cost. In other words, completely free, which sounds ridiculous, right? But it comes out of the nonprofit branches of these arms. It works from a couple of reasons, right? It's a nonprofit program. And we do the vetting personally, right? So that bus driver instance, John Smith, the bus driver, if we can confirm that he's making less than $111,000 a year and that he doesn't have coverage for said drug on the formulary, then we can go and access the drug. Now, because we can carve out that drug from the formulary, we're the only TBA that can really do that off the CVS contract. That's how we can access these drugs for free. So let's just say that John Smith, the bus driver, is making more than $111,000. Does that mean we're stuck? We can't do anything? Absolutely. We have so many different plans or partners that we build into this plan in order to save money on these high-cost RX drugs, specialty drugs. CRX, these are more for your maintenance drugs. These are tablets. But this is a formulary that is 450 drugs wide. And the only difference between, the drugs on CRX and the same name brand drugs you're using here or today is that they're coming from a formula or a pharmacy in Canada, the UK, Australia, or New Zealand, any one of those 4 tier 1 countries. Same name brand drugs, but they're typically coming at 30% of the cost.
And it's important to note that these programs, while we're accessing the drugs internationally, do come from the same manufacturers in the same manufacturer packaging. And CRX as well as Price MDs have US board certified panels of providers that work with the provider on the employee side to make sure that safety protocols are met, adherence is in place, dosage, etc. So this is a process, right? Like we don't put someone on an international drug for the first time they're taking the drug. This is for your chronic conditions. This is for your maintenance medications you've been on for more than at least 90 days. But it's a solution, and it's a solution that no buka is going to bring you because, again, they want you to get everything from their pharmacy. So
I gotta jump in here again. Can you just go back to that slide, Connor? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, because there's a lot of numbers there. It's a little busy. It's a great slide, but if we go down to literally just the bottom right, lower bottom right, and so the percentage of savings just by going self-insured and getting a smarter sourcing of the same drugs that you'd get here domestically, employers can save 67%, or in this example, 67% savings just by sourcing them in a much smarter way. Is that correct?
Accurate, yes. I mean, and the biggest one, like Advair, is a very popular prescription. Very popular. There's multiple ways you can take it, but Advair alone, my plan cost versus what you're paying, and let's think of this from the member's perspective, okay? So this largely impacts the employer's utilization, and that's what we want to solve for, because you have 50 members in a group all using Advair. This adds up. From the member's perspective, they might only be paying $20 for their prescription, right? So the large reason that programs like this with any carrier, I don't care who you're with, right? It's engagement, and the lower engagement is due to the fact that your benefits either do not make them want to, or there's no education around it, or there's no support from the carrier to make sure people know about it, all of which we are solving for. So the hook on this is you might be paying $20 walking into CVS for this drug, and that adds up, right? So for a 90-day supply, you're paying $60, but you could be paying nothing, and I can get it delivered to your door. Why wouldn't you do it? Right? I mean, so it's an education process, and this is actually a snapshot of the reporting we would show an employer during our quarterly meetings. So we'll take a look at the utilization in your plan, and we will show you a CRX disruption so that it's real to them. Hey, we know these 20 drugs are being used. There's $46,000 on the table. I've sat in employer meetings of 200 lives or less where I've seen that number upward of $100,000 to $200,000. So it can be different for everyone, but yes, on average, you are seeing a savings in your maintenance drugs of around 50 to 60 to 70% that we can access them for just by getting them from a different place. And
if I heard correctly, no impact to the front end, right? Being the employee, right? If anything, maybe an added benefit, but on the back end, the employer is seeing a huge benefit, right? So we always want to make sure that there's no disruption, right, to the employee, and the employer is getting a massive potential savings, right? Which again is going to go back to the balance sheet.
Correct.
Okay.
And Price MD is one of the same programs, right? Only difference is you're having the same level of savings. This is just more for your high cost, temperature controlled specialty drugs that can run you more into the level of hundreds of thousands, right? And so the significance there is even more impactful. The only difference is that instead of Canada, the UK, it's actually a pharmacy that comes that's based out of the Cayman Islands. We used to send folks there, and now they have the choice because of the CARES Act, whether they want to go there. We give them some walk around money, black limo service, a couple nights in a hotel. They can do all that, or we can have it shipped over at a blockchain temperature controlled unit. Ends up being the same exact cost at the end of the day. All shows up at one claim, but I mean, I'm going to use Humira, even though, like Katie said, did come off patent. It's still in the realm of like 120 to 150 annually, right? We could access it from Price MD with all the the stuff, right? Either we ship it or we send the member over around $30,000. Now we're at the 3 o'clock mark. I'm not going to go through all of these, but just so you all know, we have a great virtual health and virtual mental health built into this program. We also have in-person in-network navigation for all that, for all the mental health stuff through our relationship with Teladoc, diabetes management, Cobra. Everything's always built in. We have a multitude of different partners, but I do want to be wary of the time here. And so I will just wrap it up with, this is our ID card. Like I said, we want to keep it very simple. We want to make it look and feel just like fully insured or level funded. So that's why we have one ID card with all your information that you need on it. And other than that, I wanted to hand it back to Chris for wrapping up comments.
Yeah, and thank you guys again. That was fantastic. Lot packed in there, right? I'm sure we could probably spend another hour continuing on all the benefits, not just of going to the self-insured model, but really of doing the self-insured model with a company like EVHC, given what I see as kind of the integrative benefits that you guys provide, right? But I've had a couple questions kind of thrown at me here, and I want to kind of give you guys a chance to respond to these. Some are a little complex and some are a little bit easier. So I'll just kind of throw these out and you guys kind of provide some feedback. So one of the questions that I got, and it's a pretty good one, I think, is the person writes, we like our insurance company, in this case, Aetna. Can we keep them? How do we respond to someone with that question?
Yeah. So I guess immediately I'd want to understand, we like them, why, right? So what are we really solving for? A lot of times when people say things like that, they think of network, right? They think of no one's complained and I have access to my doctors that I need. And that's really, besides RX, usually the first point of disruption for a group, right? So something that we would provide you would be like geo-access reports, provider disruption reports. But the answer to that is, Aetna customers are probably the easiest for me because they're already using CVS, right? And that's what I'm giving them. I could not keep the Aetna network in place because my relationship with these carriers, like most TPAs or third parties, which is what I'm filed as, is we can't cannibalize their current book of business, right? So you're a group with Aetna today and they make money on all your pieces. You'd think that Aetna would say, well, if I'm going to lose them anyways, I should at least get my network access fee, but they don't think that way. So what we would do for that client is we would either switch them to Cigna or Anthem or Highmark, depending on where they're located. And listen, if it doesn't work out, which I'm sure it will, because all of them are national carriers, you have national access to providers, and all of these carriers are on top of each other now with respect to the provider numbers. And we can prove that to you. But the short answer is we would switch you to another network for the first year. And if we needed to switch back, we can. I mean, that's an option you have, and that's part of that plug and play ability. You don't need to do a full-blown open enrollment and completely change carriers to just switch the network with EVHC.
And I can speak relative to the Northeast, New York City, surrounding metro areas, Westchester, Connecticut, North Jersey, if that's where the question is coming from. The networks are just like that. I tell them all the time, like Katie said, if we need to switch it mid-year, we absolutely have that ability to. I haven't had one client complain because they moved from Aetna to Cigna, vice versa, anything like that.
Got it. Now, next question, and we might have kind of touched on this in the last part of the webinar a few minutes ago, but the question is, our employees already have really good copays on their drugs. Why should I care about how my prescriptions are sourced?
Yeah, I mean, the answer to that is, what's your renewal history been? I mean, there's two sides to every coin, right? In my world, it's the employee experience side and it's the employer experience side. And I need to solve for both of those. So I can still give you great copays, right? So I'll match the copays you have because I'm going to build this plan from ground up for you. Your employees are still going to be happy with me. But it's the intangibles, right? It's the stuff that you're not getting, the reporting, not understanding the financials that are driving your renewals. That's what going to self-funded solves for. So again, yes, I have access to drugs at $0 through most of my programs for employees. People that are making 300 grand might not care, but we are solving for a whole population. And part of that is also looking at the employer spend. So when we talk about accessing drugs through other means, we're talking about solving for the employer side.
Yeah.
And that high auto adjudication that happens, like, these are your dollars. You should care about where they're going. And you should trust, or hopefully you feel this way after this conversation, that we're using your dollars the right way and we're being diligent about how we're spending your money. Because again, this is an investment. So I don't want you to get granite countertops if you want quartz in your forever home. I'm going to get you what you want and make sure you're paying the least amount of money possible to access it. So
Very
I'm your
nice.
GC, right? I mean, that's what I'm doing for you.
Yeah.
We
So next question here. We are fully insured now. Can we switch to self-insured? Do we have to wait till our next renewal?
Never wait. Never wait to save money. That's just how I feel about it. I think at the end of the day, our ability to move you off cycle is more than just the want to save money. A lot of times there's employee benefits challenges as it relates to, do you have HSAs in place? You know, do you have COBRA? Do you have certain benefit admin systems? So we would explore all of that. But there's absolutely no reason not to have the conversation now. I think, you know, you've largely been trained when you think you know what self-funding is. That means rebates. That means low admin fees. That means solvability for higher renewals. That means potential savings. That's what you've been hearing, but we're really approaching this differently. We're focused on cost containment, mitigating risk, because none of us have a crystal ball. I don't care who your carrier is. If they know you have a cancer you're hiring in 4 months, we should all be working with them, right? So it's, what are you going to do now that the risk is on the plan? And the carrier that partners with you closest in containing that risk cost and mitigating that risk for future, that's the carrier I'd be putting my money in, right? And that's what we're trying to do.
And for smaller groups that are under that 150 mark, you know, the answer a couple of years ago might be, you know, we might have to, because the only way that, because BUCAs, they gatekeep so much data, they don't release anything. Whenever they do release, it's very vague. You know, we wouldn't be able to, we wouldn't get anything. So the best that reinsurance carriers can do is shadow price off those renewals and give you an estimate. Now with AI capabilities, I can get the best look under the hood, you know, just as good as what BUCA can give me from a claims reporting perspective, right? I'm looking at inpatient, outpatient data, claims broken out by RX, our names, illness names, so all that. So we can really properly underwrite any group, large or small, at any time, whenever they want to move.
This is awesome, guys. Well, let's we're kind of like you said, we are past the 3 o'clock mark here today. So before we close out, I do want to give a huge thank you to our two panelists here for a terrific job. Katie, Connor, I owe you guys. This was awesome. And I also want to thank everyone online for attending. I hope this has been educational and beneficial to everyone. And as a reminder, the recording of this session will be available for replay in the next day or so. Have a great day, everyone, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks, everybody.